Hi, hello, and welcome to LX2 Codependency Coaching. I am Stella. We are recording just the audio today, but I am going to let you know that I think I'm going to start a YouTube. Still need to figure out all of the tech for that, but hopefully in the next couple episodes we'll be able to figure that out, and then you can get the podcast on YouTube. In the meantime, I did want to get started and just talk to you a little bit about where my head has been for the last couple weeks. I did have a lovely vacation in San Diego last week. I was thinking this morning, at this time last week, I was getting ready to get on a boat. Actually, I was probably on a boat at this point. But I did get out to the water. I went to the Pacific, which was really lovely. San Diego is a place that I have been to many times. My sister has lived there for years, over a decade. Actually, her daughter is going to be 14, so maybe about 16, 17 years. So I've been going to San Diego for the last 17 years, usually New Year's and one other time, so at least twice a year. And I hadn't been back for about 3 years since I went on my trip and then came back. So it was really nice to get reacquainted with it and get reacquainted with my sister and my niece and nephew, who are both growing and amazing human beings. So I also met a really good friend of my sister's, and I got to spend some time with her. And I'm really grateful that I got the opportunity to do that. And I was thinking about this topic, right? So, I say often that things change. Whether we like it or not, everything changes. But one of the kind of challenging bits of it is that we need to as things change, and that is difficult to do. There's all this controversy around whether or not people change, right? And the reality is that obviously people change. We get older, we get more experiences, we have new relationships. Like, obviously people change. But the internal part of ourselves, right, as we heal and grow and evolve, requires action. So, I've been listening to new podcasts, and I think I shared with you last time I was talking. I'm listening to the Diary of the CEO. There's so much content there. But on my trip, because I drove, I listened to a couple different podcasts, different episodes of that particular podcast. And what they were talking about was so many really cool things. I love talking to scientists. I do. But I love listening to scientists who are studying a lot of different things, right? But longevity and living healthily are things that I'm passionate about as I continue to age, because that is one of the things that changes on a regular basis. And how our bodies change and evolve was super fascinating to me. And so I want to get into that a little bit. But this idea of, do people change, right? Can people change? Well, we have the ability to change. Whether or not we consciously choose to is a different story. And again, because life happens and change is part of life, it is one of those things, and I tell you guys often, like, life is going to continue lifing, right? It's going to continue throwing curveballs and giving us opportunities for lessons to learn how to do this life in particular better. And when we think about the things of, I think about the locus of control, right? The locus of control is how much actual control we have to be able to interact with our lives and interact with different stimuli. And when we're little kids, that locus of control is very, very small. Because one, we don't have the ability, we don't have the knowledge, and we don't have the awareness to make a whole lot of changes for ourselves. And so, our primary caregivers, whatever that looks like, whatever role or title, moms, dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever, they are the ones in control. They are the ones that get to choose our bedtime, what we eat, what we wear, who we're exposed to. They are the ones in control. And as we get older, we have different experiences, and our locus of control gets much bigger. We do get the opportunity to choose our food, right? We get the opportunity to choose what we wear. I was talking to someone the other day about the uniform, right? So when I went to elementary school, I went to public school, and then when I went to middle school, I went to private school, so we had a uniform, private Catholic school. And then when I got to high school, also private, but at the time there was not a uniform. At that school now there is a specific uniform, whereas before it was just a dress code. And so we had a lot more choices to choose our outfits and all the things. And then as a grown up, right, I get to choose what I wear to work because I work for myself. And so I think a client had come in and she was wearing a dress to look different than the last couple times I'd seen her. And she's like, oh, I have to dress professionally because I have this meeting at work, blah, blah, blah. And it was really kind of funny because that's how we got on the topic of uniforms. Anyway, the locus of control in terms of what we can affect in terms of changes as we grow up and get older and become adults, that locus of control gets larger, and we get to choose and decide what we want to be part of our experience, right? A lot of times when you're a little kid, you're like, I can't wait to like go to bed whenever I want to go to bed and, not have people tell me what to do, whatever. Jokes on kids, unfortunately, because as you get older, there's more people telling you what to do and telling you how to do things. But you get to choose, right? You get to choose what you participate in. You get to choose, what you have for dinner or what car you drive. It was funny, my nephew is 9 and he's super into cars and he has all these Matchbox cars and bigger cars and he's already picked his favorite car and different reasons, right? So he loves the look of them, the sound, the motion. Like he's super invested in vehicles and all the things. He's 9 years old, right? Like he doesn't really get to choose his car, but he pays attention to them. Whereas my niece, who is going to be 14 in September, like she has a lot more different preferences and things that she really enjoys. And it was really nice to get to know this version of them, right? Because I've known them both since before they were born, right? My sister is carrying them in her body. But as they came out, they developed their own personalities and their own likes and dislikes and all the things. And as they get older, they have more control over the things that happen, although they don't have a lot of control over where they live and who they live with and all of those things. And so it had me thinking about change, and it had me thinking about this evolutionary part of our conscious choice to change. Someone else had said to me, like, I don't know if I'll ever change. And I was like, well, I've known this person for a long time. I was like, well, you have, obviously, because I've known you since 2018, and obviously over the last, several years, 5 of them, you have changed, you have evolved. And sometimes change happens to us, and so we have to adapt to that. And sometimes we experience things that change our perspective or widen the lens by which we see the world. I love working with early 20-year-olds or in their 20s, because they're just figuring out life. They're starting that adult journey of trying to figure out like a job and school and who am I and what do I like and what do I not like. And I love that, because I say often, and I've said this to you guys, is that like your 20s are for messing up. Your 20s are for completely just having a lot of failures, right? And successes, and really figuring out all of the things. My niece, who is going to be 14, my sister was like, hey, do you like lasagna? And I was like, yes. My sister is also a trained chef, and she is really a good cook. And so she said, Lily's going to make lasagna. And I was like, I love that. And I was telling them the story of like the first time I made lasagna with my best friend. And we were not Italian, first of all, and didn't have exposure to really great Italian food and blah, 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 all the things. We had no idea. And it was 1992, so there was no Google. I couldn't just Google what to put in lasagna. So we winged it and we figured it out, but we did not use ricotta cheese because we didn't know ricotta cheese existed. But my niece has had a different experience because her mom is a trained chef. And, she's always grown up eating really good food. My daughter, the same, she said she'd gone on vacation and she was like, thank you so much for exposing me to a lot of different flavors and foods and whole foods. I made my daughter's baby food. Like I was super invested in like, has to be organic and blah, 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 all the things. But again, as I got more exposed to the world and different foods, different experiences, I made those choices for my daughter, and then she went on to kind of figure out how to do that herself and have her own, you know, the word is lost on me, like her own food experiences. There's an E word and I can't think of it. Any hoops. Really recognizing that as we develop and grow up, we have different experiences, and then we choose what we want to be part of that experience and what that looks like. And as I'm thinking about this concept, right, what I am thinking about is anytime you want significant change, you want to intentionally do something differently, it's not just a one try. You have to do it consistently, right? You have to, with intention, make conscious choices to create change, right? What I know to be true, and I've talked about it before, is that we have a default setting, and that default setting is influenced a lot by how we were raised and, you know, those primary caregivers and those primary experiences. And that's how we learn to do a lot of things. But then once we get out into the world, should we be so lucky as to travel and to have different experiences and to meet new people who were not raised in the same household, we learn different ways of doing things. And then we can adapt our, you know, experience with those and integrate those new, whatever they are, right? New foods, new ways of speaking. Teenagers are notorious for taking on the affectation of their peers and people around them. And so really recognizing that, yes, we can change. People can change. People do change. And sometimes that change happens to us, and sometimes it's intentional. And sometimes, you know, we continue to evolve based on our interaction with the world, right? It's a stimulus response kind of thing. And there's so many podcasts that I've been listening to, and they were talking about you know, Darwin's theory of evolution. And it's curious to me because, you know, Darwin is a very important person in my influence and sphere, specifically studying biology and all the things. But what he said, really, truly, in the very watered down, diluted version, is change happens over time. And as change happens over time, with the, you know, survival of the fittest or adaptation based on experience and environment, we get to choose our change. We get to decide what we want to be part of our experience. And so as I talked about my nephew, and, you know, he knows what car he wants to drive because he's 9. In 9 years, that could be different because then he'll have to buy his own car. But we really recognize our adaptation is based on what we are experiencing. And from a psychological perspective, as we continue to have experiences, both positive and negative, then we adapt to that information. And so I was thinking about even this idea of, like, you know, I've been recording on Instagram now for 3 years, and all of a sudden I have to adapt and change. I have to learn new tech. I have to learn new software. I have to figure out a different camera situation. Or not, I don't know. And I'm figuring it out with intention, right? Trying a little bit every day to do the research of, like, how do I do this? I recognize that I'm a little late to the YouTube game. And so, yeah, it's not something I've ever done. As, you know, certainly different platforms have evolved and changed, you know, the metrics and the experiences, I have to adapt with that, right? There's lots of people who are older than me who don't necessarily adapt to that change, right? Tech very easily. My mom has learned how to text. I don't know if she uses the Google on her phone, but she's only evolved so far. My mom is 77. But I have, you know, there are children who know how to make YouTube videos. And I am not that child, right? I'm just trying to figure it out. But recognizing that my experience and exposure has been different. I also know how to use a rotary phone, and they don't. That's not a flex. That just means I'm older than most people. But back to this idea of intentional change, right? My sister and I were talking about our exercise evolution, and we went for a quick walk, quick 2 miles in the morning. And, she's like, wow, you're really keeping up. And, she's got long legs, so she's much taller than I am. But she and I talked about the fact that, like, for us, really consciously eating well and moving our bodies around is something that helps. We both live with chronic pain. And all of my siblings are, for the most part, there's 6 of us, so I'm speaking about 4 specifically, are, like, working out humans, right? My brother's a super gym person. This sister in San Diego, she does, I think she said 3 miles every day, and, is very intentional about that. I've got another sister who goes to the gym and goes on runs and goes outside, and, so that is something that we consciously do. Even though we are genetically similar, we all have different body types. Again, this sister is 5'10". I am 5'5" on a good day. And so we all just, based on our DNA, we understand that moving around is part of our experience to be able to maintain a healthy, like, weight and work-life balance, blah, 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 all the things. And so we are all foodies. We all love to eat. I think I've shared with you guys in the past. And so we were talking about this idea of, like, intentionally moving our bodies around to be able to maintain our health. And being outside is super important to all of us. And so that's something we really enjoy. Like, when I texted her that I was coming and, we were talked about it and we're planning the trip, I was like, I really want to get out on the water. And a boat tour is perfect. And so I've been on a whale watching boat tour in San Diego. This was my 3rd or 4th one. And we did see a whale, which was awesome. And then we saw lots of dolphins, and my sister loves dolphins. But that was part of our experience, right? We consciously chose that that's what we wanted to do. And so, being desert kids, she grew up more in the mountains in Colorado than I did, but being out on the water, that is an intention, right? I am a water person. I love to be out on the water. And that's a conscious choice, right? I didn't grow up being out on the water, but that is something I wanted to do. So I seek it out every opportunity I get, right? I love to live in the desert. I don't remember who I was talking to about living in New Mexico, but New Mexico is always going to be home for me. Like, that's where it's my default setting. It's where I want to be, but I know that the world is big and wide. And so if I want to get to water, I know how to get there. I drove a different way this time. And that was a conscious choice too, is I didn't want to have to go through Phoenix. It's super hot in Arizona. And so I went through Tucson. It got up to 117, which was ridiculous. But when I came back, I wanted to go a different way because it was really hot, and I wanted to avoid Phoenix, and I didn't necessarily want to go through Tucson, so I drove back consciously through the Gila. And it was a mountain drive. It was like 10 degrees cooler. It was so much more beautiful. It did take a little bit longer, but it was worth it. And so I took my time driving back from California, and I was thinking, because that's what you do in the car when you're by yourself, is I spent a lot of time in my head really contemplating how much things have changed in the last 3 years and how differently my life looks from what it was prior to now, and really thinking about how I have changed. It was funny, and I do really enjoy it since I've been back. So many people are like, who are you? This is so different. And I love that, right? That with curiosity, they're not coming from a place of judgment, that I am different, and that was intentional. I get that my life and the choices that I have made can be perceived as extreme. And most people wouldn't choose to do the things that I have done. All the way right from the beginning to now is really as my locus of control, as my choices and my exposure got bigger, and I had different, opportunities that I took, that not everybody would do it this way. And as there are lots of people that have been in my life for decades, and we've all had a different journey and experience. Not everyone looks the same, and not everybody is still around, right? And I think that's the hardest part about changing as a human being, is that sometimes as we evolve and we grow new skills and we do things differently, we have boundaries, right? We set limits to the access to our resources. People fall away. And that's not to say that, you know, everything should stay the same always. But as I work in the field that I work in, and I work with people in relationships, either coming in as a couple or a family or coming in as an individual, a lot of times as they learn new skills and as they evolve, as they heal some of their generational trauma or some of the things that they've experienced, as they let go of those, thoughts or paradigms or behaviors, the people around them don't respond in a way that is positive, and so they fall away. The other thing is, as people just matriculate through life, just move through and learn those lessons and have those different experiences, they don't necessarily vibe with the same people, and so people fall away. And that can be really challenging because it is self-imposed grief. It is that feeling of like, you no longer fit in my life and I no longer fit in yours, and now I have to let go of the time that we shared together or the experiences. We used to do all of these things together, now we don't. And so that's that self-imposed grief where it's just like, now I have to let go of not just the old version of me, but you. And that can be really painful, which is a lot of why people don't change, right? They don't choose consciously to make the decisions of learning new skills and tools, of applying those skills and tools, because that's the other piece, and they just stay the same. And people get resentful, or they get frustrated, or they become disappointed that you no longer align with who I am and how we used to function. It's interesting when we think about, relationships specifically. A lot of times there is this theory of like, if you go to therapy, then everything will change because you will change. And, that is part of the resistance to coming to therapy or learning skills and tools, is like, you're going to be different. In New Mexico, and I'm sure this is true in other places, if you leave your family of origin and then leave your small town or neighborhood or whatever, and you go to college, then people will say things like, what, you think you're better than me? Because you have that education or whatever. Sometimes we do. Sometimes I think, well, it's not that I'm better than you, I'm just better, right? I'm just different. And that can be perceived as a threat. So people choose not to change. They choose to stay the same in the same small situation and do things the same because they don't want to be perceived as a threat. And some people are totally fine in their small neighborhoods or their small towns or their small experiences, and that's very comfortable for them, and that's okay. But not everybody stays the same. In fact, no one stays the same. Unless you're a vampire and you get stuck being 12 years old. I mean, at the end of the day, we're supposed to. We're supposed to change and evolve. We have experiences that are different and new stimuli all the time, so we adapt to that new stimuli, right? Things change around us constantly. And even though we drive the same way to work or go to the same grocery store or have the same friends and this is just what we do every Friday night, whatever, eventually there will be something different. There will be new people in that dynamic. There will be new experiences. The bartenders will change. The servers change. Like, whatever. They close that particular Applebee's or wherever it is you go. And then you have to adapt. You have to, because that's not there anymore, right? I think COVID shook things up for a lot of people because a lot of things changed. And prior to that, 9/11 happened, and that was pretty devastating, and lots of things changed. Consequently, we have to take off our shoes at the airport, and other things. But as things continue to happen around us that are changing the environment, the experience, we adapt to it. And so we consciously change, right? Whether you think about it or not, you're evolving every day. And as you do, it's helpful to remember that with conscious choices and follow through, you can become a better version of yourself. The other thing is with conscious choices and consistency, you can become a shittier version of yourself. And you get to choose, right? Once you become a grown-up, and if all things happen, equally, we are constantly evolving. We are consciously changing. We are consciously adapting. And it's interesting, right? Because quickly before we end, I want to talk just briefly about using tools and skills and therapy specifically, but not exclusively. So listening to this podcast, they were talking about like supplements and different things that we could do to improve the longevity and quality of our life. And so part of that was taking like vitamin D on a regular basis. Part of that was including magnesium. Part of that was creatine and sunlight and red light therapy and using a sauna. And so it was just like all of these things, right? How much sleep we should get, how much water we should drink, like all of those things. And I was thinking about this idea that people come to therapy, right? They learn all these new skills and tools. They start to apply the skills and tools, and people either respond well or don't. They fall away, they don't, whatever. But there's also people who come to therapy and get all the tools and skills, and then just collect tools and skills and continue to do the same thing, right? They continue to have the same conversations. They continue to have the same fights. They continue to, use their default settings, and nothing changes. And I've said to you guys before, there is a podcast called Nothing Changes If Nothing Changes. If you don't use the tool, it will not fix your life. And again, my goal is not to fix anybody's life. My goal is to just manage my own life and show up with tools and skills. I learn new tools and skills all the time. One, because I'm required to maintain my license. And two, because that's what I enjoy doing. Right? And so if you come to therapy and you learn all the skills and tools and you're like, this is hard, I'm not going to use them, then things will not change. You will not change. You will stay the same, and you'll have the same fight over and over, and you'll have the same conversation over and over, and your friends, you'll get together on Friday and go to Applebee's. Unless Applebee's moves, and you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Is like, you can come and have a conversation with a professional, doesn't have to be me, there are lots of great professionals out there, and learn some skills and then never apply them, and things will stay the same, right? And if that's what you want, totally fine. But if you want to do things differently, if you want to become a better version of yourself, you're gonna have to apply those tools. You're gonna have to fail. You're gonna have to try again. You're gonna have to try a different tool. You're gonna have to, do things in a way that is uncomfortable. You might lose some folks, and you might get better. You might get worse too, and that's okay too. Like, that's the thing about change, is it's not just in one direction. It's not even bi-directional. It is all over the place, and it is a conscious choice. I'm going to, for my part, and my little tiny slice of this moment, I'm going to say, it might be worth it to have a different experience. It might be worth it to go in a different direction and have a different experience, because then you widen your lens, you widen that locus of control, and you recognize, oh, I can actually be better. I can actually do things differently. If I get the opportunity to wake up again, might as well try, right? A lot of times we're going to get stuck on the hamster wheel. A lot of times we're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, something will change. And you can either wait for that something to change, because life is going to change, that's what happens, or you can consciously be part of it and move with it, right? You can consciously recognize, oh, I'm going to do something different just to see, right? What's going to happen? I listened to a different podcast and I got a lot of different new insights. So I'm grateful for that. I will keep you guys posted on what will happen in terms of creating a YouTube channel. I know I said it was a lot of work and I didn't want to do that, but here we are and I'm working on it. So I'm the kind of person that leans into change. I actually enjoy the roller coaster of, I don't know what's going to happen, right? Most days are the same, and then every once in a while something different happens. And that for me is exciting. So there's your nugget. I am going to end recording the audio because we don't have a video today. But as I continue to evolve and change, I invite you to recognize if you have some tools and skills that you haven't used in a while, maybe it's time to apply them. Maybe use a little consistency. If it didn't work the first time, try again. Do something differently. Life is going to continue to change. You're going to continue to change. But if you want to be a better version of yourself, you're going to have to do that with intention and consistency. All right, guys, I will talk to you next week. I'll post this today. And if you want to hear from me, or you want to get a hold of me, or you want to just have a chat, my Gmail or my email address is lx2.cod.coach@gmail.com, and you can still follow me on the social media platforms, all the things, but hopefully I will get a YouTube up and going, and then you'll be able to see my face again. I will talk to you soon. Take care.